Welcome to F1 on the Rocks. Sit back and pour up your favorite drink. Hey, we're not the ones behind the wheel.
What up, everybody? That was Brian telling me that I have to do the intro today, right on the spot. I'm here. I'm with you. I'm pumped. This is the time of the week that I can tell you for sure I look very much forward to. We look very much forward to talking about this stuff. My man here, Brian Dower, co-hosting with me. How you been?
I've been good, man. I had 0 plumbing issues this week.
Hey, that's
Boom.
a win for you. That's
a huge win
for you. Yeah, people joining us for the first time are like, why the hell does that matter? Go back a couple episodes and you'll find out. But seriously, that's good to hear. It's been a good week for us too, kind of some ups and downs, but we're looking forward and upward, and obviously with that fantastic race last weekend.
So good.
But my friend, no time to dilly-dally. Let's have a shot together and dive right into this. In honor of Carlos Sainz, I went and got a fireball.
Nice.
A little fireball to kick off the episode here for us.
Very nice. I've got my Tito's. I've got my Tito's in the Jerry Halen glass, my grandpa. So David Halen, if you're listening or watching, I'm drinking out of my Jerry Halen glass.
Cheers. Oh, I also got this too. I know I kind of went overboard today, but it's like, hey, why not live life on the edge? I got to get this bad boy cracked open, but
what do you have
Long
there?
Branch, a little bit of wild turkey.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah, fun fact, my first whiskey shot ever was wild turkey. It was in Europe, right outside the Coliseum.
Wow.
I was only 18 years old. Don't tell anybody that.
Man, you're not messing around tonight with that.
No, yeah.
I like it.
I promise to be responsible. That's all you need to know.
You're not driving.
Well, sir, why don't you give us the too long didn't read race review?
Ooh, I get the Will Smith TLDR. Let's do
it. You
it.
get it here. In fact, I'll even give you this.
I feel honored.
There you go.
Awesome. So the TLDR race review, we had another banger. We had a sprint for those who did or did not watch or know we had a sprint. And it was good. I love the sprint. We're handing out more points for it this year. So we had a sprint. Max took it pretty easily. But when they finished, Leclerc kind of said over the radio, like, we'll get him tomorrow. And sure enough, that's what happened. So Leclerc wins, Verstappen second. Sainz had a brutal engine blowout with like 10 laps left. He easily would have been second. The Mercs came third and fourth after what was an ugly qualifying. So Ferrari scored some points. Leclerc chipped away at the lead of Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship, and here we are. That was my 28 second. I'll take it.
It was close enough. Yeah, I think Ferrari showed up with the lion's share of pace, and I think the least amount of tire deg was the kind of the words of the announcers for F1 of the day than the rest of the paddock, which set them up for success. What a fantastic race, top to bottom. We're going to do things a bit differently today, and I wanted to give the listeners a heads up. Brian, break it down. Why are we and what are we doing differently?
We are. So we're going to do it a little differently. The main thing here is that we're going to assume you watched the race. And if you didn't watch the race, maybe watch the highlights, or you already know what happened or whatever it is. But we got caught up a little bit in previous episodes. Lap 9, this happened. Lap 12, this happened. And I'm the king of just diving in and not realizing I'm being boring as hell when I'm talking about stuff. So we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to talk more about, discuss what happened instead of tell you what happened. I don't know if there's much of a difference there, but we're going to kind of run through the drivers, the teams. We'll maybe not talk about all the drivers if, nothing happened, but give us some feedback. That's what we're interested in, right? I think this is episode 6, maybe our 5th race review. So we're going to change it up, but we don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent if you guys don't say anything. So hit us up on social or our email, f1ontherocks@gmail.com, and let us know so we can continue to make this thing better and better.
Yeah, the beauty of what we're doing here is that you could easily not watch the live stream and come back later, catch it up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, or just listen to the podcast at a later time. So if you haven't watched the race and you're like, I really don't want the spoilers, give it a pause and come back later. We won't be bothered if you have a specific way you want to run through things. But so some highlights. Do you guys have, when you were listening to and watching the race this weekend with the family, did you sit down with Bridget and the kids to watch this one?
I watched it by myself.
Okay.
It was
because I remember
glorious.
last weekend you got to watch it with the kids, and I was like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's always fun. I usually get to watch it with Bailey when Rio goes down for her nap, and we're always like, the whole room has to be quiet during that time, so we're always like,
Right.
no, the instinctual, like, I can't believe that just happened. But for sure, I think ultimately we're pumped to talk about things. Let's start with Red Bull. I mean, we can work our way from what I would call the top right now, which is Red Bull down.
Yeah.
What happened? Give me the breakdown on quali and the Red Bull team.
So Verstappen in quali looked good. He took pole. He had a slow sector 1 and 2, but in sector 3, just blitzed it and took pole. Not by a ton, 300ths maybe, something like that. But the sprint, like we talked about briefly in the TLDR, he had a comfortable drive up front. Perez in quali had some issues with track limits. We're going to do a segment on track limits here in a little bit, but he had a lap deleted from Q2, but after Q3 ended. So he got into Q3, he used up tires, put miles on the engine, etc. in Q3, and then after Q3 ended, the FIA or the stewards or whoever said, "Oh yeah, we deleted that lap in Q2, so you're starting 13th tomorrow in the sprint."
Yeah, it was tough because that resulted that when Q3 ended, that issue that he had resulted in him losing all of the laps he put in Q3, and that kind of sucks because it's like, even if you're in Q3, you're like, at least one of these laps should count, but
right.
Not the case for Mr. Poor Perez. On the sprint side, though, to me it looked like Red Bull had the cartoon like locked in pretty fantastically. Pulled away right at grid start, relative ease, which kind of left me wondering, like, on race day, hindsight 2020, I was like, damn, what did they change in the car that resulted in such a different race on Sunday? I heard some rumors in the paddock that they added 10 kilos of weight in whatever their most recent update was. And I don't know if that update came before the sprint or it had to have, because they would have been under parc fermé between sprint and race. So yeah,
right.
They added some weight, which wasn't a problem for them on Saturday, but was on Sunday. And so perhaps maybe the tune was a little bit off. I'm not sure. And then
or maybe
Perez,
the hard tires weren't working like they wanted to. Could be too.
Yeah, well, and I think Max even said, like, the mediums, or it might have even been Horner, that was like, the mediums were great on Saturday, and then maybe just they weren't ready or hadn't properly planned for the hards on race day. But I think Perez looked really sharp in the sprint, like that fantastic racecraft, some super safe, clean passes. I felt like he was getting the most out of the Red Bull that he could get for a sprint after having a relatively tough qualifying news information, so.
Yeah, for sure. I think he went from 13th to 5th in the sprint, was looking good, making, safe, clean passes. And I was impressed with that. And that's what he needed to do, right? Put himself up into the top 5, give him a chance at a podium on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then from a race standpoint with Red Bull, we leave the sprint. We're like, yeah, feeling real good. I mean, at least I was, with having Perez on a couple different fantasy teams and whatnot. But on race day, where did we kind of see Red Bull settle in from a race standpoint?
Yeah, so this was interesting. So Verstappen takes off 4, 5, 6 laps into the race. Maybe we think, okay, he's got his 2-second gap. He's out of DRS range. Looks like Max is just going to drive away with it. And then before you know, Leclerc's on him within DRS and is all over him. It was really interesting. And I guess, like you touched on earlier, it seems like the rear tires were just maybe getting eaten up a little bit more on that Red Bull than the Ferrari. So we'll get into more of the Verstappen Leclerc in a moment, but I just want to clear out Checo here so we can really talk Verstappen Leclerc and
That's
that
a really
battle.
messed up thing to say. Don't say clear out Checo. I didn't want Checo to be cleared out. I wanted Checo to finish the race. Thank you.
So Russell cleared out Checo. That was 2 years in a row. Checo just dumped his race into the gravel on turn 4. So anyway, lap 1, they're coming down the straight down to turn 4, and Checo's on the outside of George Russell. They go into the corner. Checo's ahead at the apex. I know you want to talk about this a little bit too. So Checo's ahead at the apex. Russell takes the racing line. They make contact. Checo goes into the gravel, damage, race over. He retires, I don't know, 15 laps later, something like that.
Yeah. I went back when I saw your notes on this because I was like, I'm angry about this because Russell being involved 2 weeks in a row in a first lap under 5 corner incident was like,
right.
Okay, something's going on. Here's what I broke down. The gap that Perez closed headed into turn 3 on lap 1 was very substantial and sufficient. I mean, he came out of the second corner out of the first corner, and passing the second corner was ready in an advantageous position. So coming out of 3, all he had to do was kind of tuck back in behind George. He really didn't need to do as much as he was doing from turn 4 into 5. And the team had already told him, according to, media, that don't fight this fight right now. We already know we're faster than Mercedes. Right. Tuck in, take a DRS for 3 corners on the next big straight. Shit, wait until the beginning of lap 2 on the first big straight. Take him going into corner 1. I'm struggling with this one because I watched the clip 5 times. Russell maintained a good racing line. He didn't open the wheel left. You can see his steering wheel's in the whole time. The carb's moving naturally out of the turn, which you would expect. So I don't know. I feel like the penalty on Russell was a bad call. I feel at the end of the day that Perez was. I do. I know, and that sounds crazy to say, but I feel like Perez was being overly needy and pushy in an opportunity in which he had a lot of race to go and could have supported the team in a battle versus Ferrari.
For sure. And that's Checo being Checo to a T, right? Like, dude, you're not in a Force India anymore. You're not in a midfield car. Be a little bit patient, and you're going to get this pass done on lap 2 or 3, like you said. But
I don't know.
I must disagree with you, man. I think they had to call a penalty there. By the letter of the law, the car ahead at the apex, you can't shove him off. And I know he didn't open the wheel. He was on the racing line. I think he understeered a little bit, cold tires, right? But the fact of the matter is he didn't leave him room on the outside, and Perez was ahead at the apex, whatever you decide the apex being. There could be a late, early, and whatever apex, depending on the line you're taking. But I disagree with you, man. And I think this is the first time we've disagreed on the pod about something like this.
I appreciate your disagreement. I respect it. And I can almost damn guarantee you this won't be the last time we have this conversation in the season now, because it's trending towards these questions about Apex and diving in and who was there first. This will happen again in an almost identical manner, in an almost identical corner, in one more race before the end of the season. So
for sure,
we'll come back to this and see where we align on agreement for penalty calls. But no, that takes care of Red Bull. Let's go into Ferrari, because obviously a little bit of the talk of the town now is that with what appeared to have been some craziness between Leclerc and Sainz last race in Silverstone, we're hoping somebody level set with them and was like, hey, when you race here in Austria, you don't have to act like total assholes to each other. Let's see how you can do. And
they didn't get the memo.
They didn't get the memo. Yeah, so somebody left it in the copy machine, I guess, or something. But break down quali for me. What happened with Leclerc and Sainz?
Yeah, quali pretty straightforward. Leclerc second, Sainz third. They were close. I mean, they were close, both close to Verstappen. I think Leclerc was ahead of Sainz by maybe 500ths, something like that. So it was close. Second and third. Quali was not the craziest thing, but the sprint, my friend, was something different.
Yeah, a whole nother tier of friendly competitiveness, if you will.
Yeah, I guess we could call it that. So, do you have something before I get into this?
Well, I think I just want to preface that, like, where we're going with this is this new term that I coined while I was sitting there. Like, I was sitting watching the sprint, and I had, like, this revelation. So I made a term that I feel like we can use from now in perpetuity. I'm not going to trademark it, so if any of our listeners want to use it in everyday work conversations, please go for it. It's called a kerflusterfluck.
A kerflusterfluck.
It's a tongue twister. A kerflusterfluck.
5 times fast.
Yeah, it was nonsense for these guys in the first 7 laps. All I was thinking was, this is a kerflusterfluck. You guys are trying to throw away what is basically at this point a guaranteed 2-3 grid start in the race tomorrow.
Right.
You want to go up one spot? Like, chill out.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I loved it, but let me tell you that. Loved it. I think everybody did. Maybe if you're a hardcore Ferrari fan, you don't, or a Leclerc fan or whatever. But as just a general fan of F1, fuck, dude, that was awesome. I loved seeing them go back and forth like that. Like, same machinery, drivers trying to prove themselves. It was totally stupid and useless, especially in a sprint. Like, clearly it didn't matter. They had the race pace on race day, obviously, as we know. But yeah, like Leclerc and Sainz battling right off the hop. Sainz gets past them before turn one. They trade places back and forth. They're defending hard against each other. It was fair. It was clean. They never, touched or anything. But I've got to imagine Mattia sitting on that pit wall was just like, holy shit, please, guys, like, somebody get a half a second ahead here so we could be done with this. And eventually they did. But yeah, that was surprising coming out of Silverstone.
Yeah, I was reminiscent of a Drive to Survive clip, which I pulled for you and the audience members of today's podcast. I'm going to go ahead and share it with you now.
Carlos Sainz is on my special list. We are getting on very, very well together. We spend a lot of time during the off-season together, actually.
Can guarantee you Leclerc wasn't thinking that when Sainz was all over his ass for the first 7 laps. Like,
yeah, exactly.
This wasn't the case. That's all I'm saying.
So, Leclerc in the race.
Yeah, race time.
I'm going to do another thing here and get Sainz out of the way.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah. I'm taking a stab at the lap 53, let's call it mid 50s. There's 15 laps left in the race. Sainz is coming up on Verstappen. It's going to be an easy pass. He's got fresh tires. He's got the car with the pace. On the run down to turn 4, you see smoke start to come out of the engine. It's fucked, and he's on the radio immediately. No. Pulls over up to the left of turn 4, kind of up a little escape road there. Then you see an actual explosion inside of the bodywork of this engine. I haven't seen anything like that since I've been watching Formula One.
No, the fiberglass popped. I was like, oh, shit.
That was nuts. Yeah.
He felt it in his back too, right? Like,
I'm sure
if
they're
Hamilton
right up
feels
against
cold
it.
on his tailbone, Sainz felt up like inertia on his back. Yeah,
absolutely. So he pulls up and he's on this incline. Flames start coming out the back, little flames, right? And then they get bigger and bigger. The marshals see it. They're running down with the fire extinguishers, but he tries to get out of the car. And obviously these things don't have handbrakes, right? And maybe he couldn't have left it in gear. He probably should have just turned it into the wall or something at that point. But long story short, he's going to get out of the car, but every time he lifts his foot off the brake, the thing starts rolling backwards. So finally the marshals come down, put some chocks behind the tire, stop it. He gets out. They spray it down, the whole 9 yards. It was more dramatic maybe than it should have been. I'm sure they'll use it in Drive to Survive of him jumping out of fire or something. But I don't think he was really ever in that much danger. He was just trying to not let a flaming car roll back onto the track, which I think is commendable.
Yeah, I got you. Here, look at this. I'm going for a spur of the moment spontaneity move here. That's the shot right there.
Jeez.
Given the Phoenix a little bit of a run for his money here with this photo, I know risky to say because that was a whole nother thing, but for real.
I love Grosjean, but he just milks the shit out of that, huh?
Well, I mean, he should.
And I mean, I guess he have to.
He retired on it. Yeah, he retired on it. So
he wrote a book, the whole 9 yards. He's gonna have a movie coming out.
He's always wearing super nice watches. You got to give him credit for that. Anyways,
Swiss.
Distracted.
Yeah, distracted. Let's get back to it. Leclerc. So he basically just flat out had the pace. Like I said before when we were talking about Max, 3 laps in, it looked like he was going to run away with it. He had a gap. He ends up overtaking Max 3 times. And the first time, this overtake was just chef's kiss good, man. I mean, it was so good. So
Charles, that's inside turn 4, right?
Inside of turn 4.
Yeah.
Excuse me, inside of turn 4. And 2 to 3 laps before that, Leclerc's all over him, and every single turn, he shows inside turn 3, he shows inside turn 4, Max covers it off, And I'm thinking to myself, like, Leclerc, if you're not going to make the move, stop getting off the racing line here and slowing yourself down. But he didn't need my advice. This guy knows what he's doing, right? So he just keeps showing, and Max eventually, he just kind of lulls him to sleep, right? And then super late, throws it inside turn 4, That was a move, man. And Leclerc has been known, he's kind of like a gamer this way, right? He's like a fox. He just kind of outwits Verstappen. It has a couple times this year. The first time in Bahrain with the DRS zones, letting him get past at the end of the straight and all that good stuff. Like, Leclerc can really show that gamesmanship. I love it.
He's a survivor. I think the survivor motto was outwit, outlast, outplay.
Boom.
Right? And that's exactly what he did, because if you think about it logically, if I'm Leclerc and I know that the car will eventually have pace to keep up with Red Bull, I'm kind of doing some film study, like NFL style. Like, I'm going to go back and watch how he drove this track last year and how he covered. And now I know, and at least I'm employed to make instantaneous decisions about where to pass. He knew what he was doing. He knew that going inside and going inside and going inside would get Max tired to the point where Max is like, all right, I'm just going to drive, because he's not actually going to take the pass. And
right.
The one time that Max thought to himself, I'm just going to drive, he's not going to take the pass, he took the pass.
Yep. That was awesome. I love that move. So pits a couple times. He ended up doing 3 stops. The third one was on the VSC for Carlos. Passed Verstappen 3 times on track. Verstappen never really fought him very hard, which is interesting. Like, is that just Max this year, or is that just Max against Leclerc? I don't know. What's your opinion on that? Because a lot of people are surprised at that, myself included.
My knee-jerk instinct, my knee-jerk reaction is that he had conversations with maybe some more veteran drivers and maybe some sit-downs with Horner and some other folks in between seasons, and took a look at mistakes that were made where points could have been earned regardless of whether he was as careless as he was, right? So, like, what's it worth to you? Is it worth fighting the fight and getting knocked out? Or is it worth taking 7 points less when you're in the current driver's championship lead?
Yeah.
When the other person drives away, I think it's a bit of him making a bit more strategic decisions. And I've seen some press conferences with him. Lad Bible just released a YouTube video with him and Sergio talking, agree or disagree on things. And he's communicating more maturely about how he races, but also about his relationship with other racers. So I'm wondering if, like, part of that is just him kind of coming into a new psychological, like, if I actually do want to be a repeat champion, it's going to take more than me just throwing it into a corner and hoping that I come out on top.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot to, I guess, unpack, but I think for sure he's definitely driving differently with Leclerc. Some of that also being tied to the fact that he's driving with Leclerc differently because he's driven with Leclerc longer than he's driven with Hamilton. So
sure. Yeah, I agree. And he's got that world championship already that, that's not hanging over his head anymore. And, he's maturing, right? The kid's 24 years old. So I think probably winning that last year did a lot for that side of it. Take your wins when you can get them, pick your battles, and kind of go from there. So that knocks out the first 2 teams. I know you're fired up about this one. I am too. Talk to me about Haas.
Dude, like, if I can actually, like, close my eyes and go back to moments on a sofa with my wife in 2021 where I'm looking at the scoreboard and it's Haas 1920, and the next race I'm like, please Lord, and it's Haas 1920, and I'm like, please Lord, and it's Haas 1920, and I just was like, almost like the listener question before about Williams, is there ever hope for Williams? And I, knowing that they were planning strategically to do well this season, I was like, I really hope they do well this season. And, 2 races. I think 2 races in a row, we're starting to see a maturity in Haas that I think a lot of people have been begging for and asking for the last 2 race seasons. And I can only wish and hope them the best. I'll do a little bit of breakdown of Haas. In quali, both Magnussen and Schumacher, went into Q3 and ripped out a P6 and a P7 respectively. So
that's impressive.
For them to just even get into Q3, awesome. For them to be mid-pack coming out of Q3 on the grid, awesome. Like, let's go. So that sent us into the sprint thinking, like, well, as long as they can keep their heads on and do some, some quality racing, we'll see some good stuff. The sprint for them was a little bit funny though, right? So we got an essence of Mick being stuck behind Magnussen and not so happy. And we got a little bit of Magnussen kind of like keeping it out front and not really having what I would call patience for inter-team nonsense. And we saw too, there's a video clip, if you go back and find it, Mick's getting out of the car and he's like ripping his helmet off and his heat guard off, and he's pulling his headphones out of his jacket, and he's got like this like furrowed brow. Like, it's not a face that you see on Mick ever, so you know he's not okay. And Magnussen's rolling up to his guys in his pit like, "What's up, dude? Good to see you, bro." Like, not even thing, but there were radio comms, you know, with the two of them, both in the sprint and in the race, that you were like, man, really? Is that needed? The nonsense that happened in the sprint with Magnussen and Mick, though, allowed Perez to kind of like squeeze into a corner. So it's that whole thing where, like, if you're fighting with your teammate, go ahead, go for it. If the team says, if you don't have the lap time, you got to get out of the way, fair.
Yep.
But if what you're doing causes jeopardy for the placement of both cars, then I have a problem with it. If I'm running strategy for a team, I have an issue with, like, hey guys, like, let's just run the DRS for a bit. Maybe their tires are wear out, they'll back off, and then you guys can do what you want to do with a little bit more space between you, where it doesn't put us all at jeopardy. Hindsight 2020, but it is what it is. What do you think about the way that the two Haas boys are kind of playing right now? I mean, are you okay with that, or?
I am, for sure. I mean, Magnussen's tough, man. I don't think it's easy to be a teammate with Magnussen. Grosjean and him, it seemed like they had a good relationship, but I mean, how many times on track were those guys clashing they were together a while, 3 or 4 years. But I mean, Magnussen is a rapid driver. I think he is really fast. I think his decision-making isn't great all the time. But I stand by that decision that Steiner and the boys made on the pit wall, because if Magnussen starts to drop back to keep him in the DRS and all of this stuff to keep him in front of Hamilton, very likely Hamilton's going to get past him anyway. It's a fucking Mercedes. Like, let's be real. And then Hamilton's also going to get by Magnussen. And instead, because they didn't do that, Magnussen started the Grand Prix in front of Hamilton. So I'm okay with it. I think it's important to remember from them, and for Mick too. I get it's hard for Mick, right? He's finally performing, so he wants every ounce he can squeeze out of it. But it's a sprint. Like,
side sub question: you're Mick and you get one teammate. Do you want Magnussen or do you want Mazepin? World politics aside, I should say.
Yeah, I think if I'm confident in my skills, I want Magnussen, because it means nothing to beat Mazepin.
Okay, I feel the same way. I was just curious.
Yeah.
So you brought up the race stuff with the two boys. Let me break it down real quick, just because I'm hype on the Haas for the Austria weekend. So Magnussen on the 24th lap makes this nasty move, 3 wide into the first corner, and he gets a squeeze by Joe and Alonso. It was so sick, like the way that he.
This was when they were coming up to turn 3, like 5 of them.
Exactly. No. This was turn 1. So they're coming down the grid, and he makes this. He sees what's going on with Alonso and Joe, and he's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna little boop," and he like peeks inside of turn 1. He slips past them, right? So he's kind of out front of those two guys. What I didn't acknowledge was that right behind him, Lando and Mick are coming up, and so outside of turn 1 through turn 2, headed into turn 3, we get this like pack of 5. And I have goosebumps. I have goosebumps talking about it, because it's one of those moments where you're like, the new things that that FIA has sanctioned with regards to how the cars are functioning and how they can group together. This is it. Like, this is that moment.
So good.
You run 5 cars into turn 3, which is you have to brake. Like, you can't not brake going into that corner, or you're literally just gone. See you later, hanging out with folks in the grandstands. And so it was like a wow moment. The whole exchange with all those cars, and Magnussen ends up out front. And I was like, you know what, dude? You fight for it. You deserve that. Like, in that moment at the grid, you were not in front, and now you are 2 turns later. You did your job in the car and performed, what I would say to be really, really well. So good on Magnussen for that.
Good on Magnussen, especially making that move into turn 1. There are not a lot of overtakes into turn 1 on that track. And that was smooth, man.
Well, you're either on sausage curb or you're running into someone as they go out left side of the corner. So
right.
You only have a couple options. All right, I'm going to run through the Mick thing real quick, because there's a lot to be said about Mercedes and their performance. Mick loses his DRS to Kevin. Mick calls in on the radio and he goes, "Team, tell Kevin, slow down a little bit." Kevin...
This is in the sprint, right?
This was in the race, wasn't it? Wasn't the Hamilton part in the race?
That was sprint.
I have it backwards, as
Yep.
my mother would say. I'm backtracking, audience members, for the sprint,
all right.
but it's important to understand that little bit of dynamic.
Yeah.
When Kevin gets the radio from the team, slow down, back up, help out Mick, he just never replies. Like, he goes, I think, a solid 2 minutes without any radio replies after that. Which
Magnus is just like, nah, no thanks.
and you know, like, how Hammy is, you know how Max is, like, instantly back on the radio. I will not do that. I will not do that. You know, like, so the fact that Magnussen was just like, nah, I'm gonna keep driving. So my question for you is, do you think that a teammate should ever slow down to lend DRS to the teammate behind him? Did the team kind of see this coming? Should they have started this convo before Mick even got outside of DRS? Like, could they have kind of helped the team before the team needed help? What's your take on that?
I'm not big on it, and we've seen it happen a couple times over the years, and the guy behind is always saying, you know, tell so-and-so to get back, to slow down, get him within 1 sec. But there's so many other things at play, like tire temps, tire dag, what laps this guy's doing, is he on the same strategy, all that stuff. I mean, this is the sprint, so it's a little bit different. They're not coming in for stops or anything. They're both just on the mediums, running the mediums. But I'm not big on it unless, you know, they're in Abu Dhabi in the last race and they need 2 more points to move from 7th to 6th in the constructors, and they really need to play a team game. Then I could see it. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't think it's the move.
You're going mid-pack team strategy, end of season is where it really is going to make a difference. And in their case, it might, depending on how they continue to keep finishing, they might actually pop up a little bit in mid-pack grid for constructors. So we'll see how that goes. You wrote me this question, and it took me a minute, but I found the answer. Is Mick slowly turning into his father?
What is the answer?
He is.
Yes.
In a weirdly conspiracy theory, deep dark hole, Will gets excited kind of way. Okay, you ready for this?
2 weeks in a row with a conspiracy theory.
Podcast fam's gonna be pumped about this. Okay, at F1 Stats Guru, I love to give credit. So at F1 Stats Guru and at GP Fans Global worked on a joint infographic, which will get retweeted out. Brian's in charge of Twitter. He's gonna retweet it for you guys so that way you have access to it. In the 1997 Austrian GP, Michael Schumacher started at P9 and finished P6. Here in the 2022 Austrian GP, Mick started at P9 and finished in P6. And in both occasions, they scored their first points. What? This is weird. Now we have to start keeping track of these stats.
First points in Austria.
First points in Austria.
Yeah, okay. Because he'd won a driver's championship before that, so I just wanted to clarify.
No, yeah. Okay, sorry. First points in Austria, yes.
Yeah. That's wild.
In any case, a wild stat. Yeah. I guess that wasn't Mick's first points ever, was it?
No, Silverstone, he got him.
Right. Got it. First points in Austria. Yeah, I guess I should have caveat. It's still a weird coincidence. But
it's weird for sure.
Thank you for just distilling it a little bit. I got
both with Ferrari power units.
Level 10, and I should have been at level 8 with that one. So.
That's just what I just reel you in, man. That's what I'm here for.
Anyways, Mick was the unequivocated driver of the day for his performance.
Yeah.
Not only through the weekend, I think, but also throughout the race. Calm, cool, composed, stepping up to the plate, and he deserved it. So.
Did you see how genuinely happy he was when they told him he won driver of the day?
Yeah.
I love it.
I think it means a lot, though. You know, you've got all these people who are at home that like I said, that last year were really rooting for the team, and you just don't get that moment to be like, hell yeah!
Yeah, for sure.
But now you do, and so you're like, F1vote.com. Yes, it was Mick. It was definitely Mick, you know?
Yep. And I feel like so many other drivers, you know, the Verstappens of the world, like, how many drivers of the day does he have? He could care less. And they told Mick at the end of an interview, and he was just so fired up. And it was genuine. Like, I love that. That's why we love Mick.
Yeah, and it puts things in perspective at a larger level, right? Like, $5 to some people means $5 way more than to other people means $5. So
for sure. It's all relative.
Might be something to keep hold on to there. Well, I got some stuff for Mercedes, and
hit me with it.
With quali, Hamilton was like getting me pumped, and the people that knew me before the podcast that were in like some group text chats with me, like they would call me a Hamilton hater and a Max lover, and like, I'm watching Q1 and Q2 and I'm like, dude, Hamilton's ripping it, like looking real strong. I'm going to go on the record again and say I am 99% certain that come the last 2 races of the season, Mercedes is going to either be vying for the number 2 spot in the Constructors or the number 1 spot in the Constructors. And it sounds insane right now. It does. It sounds ridiculously insane. But I think they're playing a turtle. I think they're playing the slowest play, the tortoise and the hare. I think, like, think about Russell's placements. Like,
they hands down, Mercedes has squeezed every bit of efficiency out of their season thus far.
Now
Every
imagine-
time you look, they're finished 4th and 5th. They're finished 3rd and 4th. No retirements. I mean, they've been incredible.
And now imagine if Hamilton steps back into the race form that we know when he's got a vehicle that does what he wants it to do and responds the way that he wants to and has the performance that it's capable of. Suddenly we're talking about Hamilton-Russell double podiums. We're talking about Hamilton-Russell points, right? Russell, in my opinion, has carried the lion's share of the weight on the team of his shoulders. But hey, that's why they brought him in. Good on you, dude. You're doing the job. Anyways, Hamilton
They've got the
ends
best.
up...
They've got the best driver pairing out of the top 3 teams for sure. Before you go into that, I got a question for you. Since you think they're going to be up there, Hamilton has won a Grand Prix every year since he's been in F1. Does he win one this year?
Yeah, 100%. 100%, because there's going to be a bunch of power unit shit that after the summer break the Mercedes team comes out with, and it's
a good point.
With 1 or 2 maybe in coincidental type scenarios with Ferrari and Red Bull, the opportunity is quite there for him. You know,
Yeah,
a good
other
example
teams
would be
taking penalties.
A great example would be Austria, right? If for some reason Max and Leclerc didn't have a clean exchange in a corner, sayonara, Hammy's out front and no one's catching him. Not at that point in time.
I hope you're right.
Unfortunately, in qualifications, I backtracked quite a bit. Hamilton crashed out. You know, it sucked. Here's what's cool. I read somewhere that someone pulled a wind analysis on the corner where he went out of, and at the moment of the crash in the corner that he went out of was the strongest gust of the day through that corner. Take that as you will. It could have just been some like super hammy fan.
Yeah,
like,
signed
I
Lewis
love
Hamilton fan.
so much I'm going to make this up. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But Russell did good. Crashed out also in Q3. Was doing pretty good. I laughed at this because it was like after Hamilton went out, I was like, it's just not a Mercedes Q3 kind of day. Like, what are you going to say about it after that? It wasn't a fun one. But what happened in sprint for Mercedes?
Aside from getting stuck behind Mick, not a whole hell of a lot. Hamilton kind of just got held up. Russell had a nice, because he started the sprint in 5th, Hamilton started in 8th, and Russell just kind of had a nice, quiet Saturday drive by himself. Hamilton got stuck behind Mick, finally got past him, ended up splitting the Haas. So not a ton going on in the sprint for those two. And aside from Russell, which we kind of already talked about, we can go into it more on the incident, but in terms of the race, not terribly crazy there as well. You know, outside of lap 1, it was just solid performance. They finished 3rd and 4th, got a shit ton of points, and move on to the next one. It was very efficient for the Mercedes team.
Yeah, and I feel like it's, if you go back, right, you take a snapshot of this whole season up until Austria, and you say to Hamilton and all of the Mercedes team, hey, look at what Russell's been doing. He's been putting in a solid performance. He's not been over the top. He's in top 5 at least for every race this season. And this slow and steady so far for us has kind of been doing good. Like, maybe we just take that approach across the board. Hamilton, slow and steady wins the race. Team, slow and steady with performance and reliability wins the long-term race, and that's why I stand firm on my thought that we could see them really playing a role in constructors towards the end of the season.
Boy, I'd love that. 3 teams vying it out. Oh, that'd be incredible.
It would mix up the Drive to Survive drama, wouldn't it? They'd have to cut between three drivers and 3 team principals as opposed to just back and forth between Toto and Horner over and over. So.
They'll just make it all up anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. Yeah. Let's record these guys fighting in a corner real quick and throw that in the episode. Your dream team, McLaren. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I mean, it was uneventful. They scored double points. They finished 7th and 9th in the race. We don't have to go into really much else there with them. I know we're getting a little lengthy as it is, so not a whole hell of a lot. We poured one out for Ricardo last week, and that has been like our reverse jinx. Like it technically it worked. He was in the points. He was 9th, so he scored a couple points, but he was still slow, unfortunately. And there's been a ton of talk. Ricardo has said he's staying. Zach Brown said he is staying, but still every day it's like, is Colton Herta going to be the new driver, or is so-and-so going to be the new driver? But I think we'll see them both back. I just keep hoping every week that Ricardo finds whatever it is that he's struggling with, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know either. I saw a clip of him last season talking about his ability to drive the McLaren car, and it just left me with this weird kind of take of I just really don't know what's happening with him right now.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. I will tell you this though. His Instagram post and the resonation of that post with the general Formula One community was like, he's definitely saying this so that way if he gets released, we know it wasn't of his own volition and his own decision. Like, he's covering his ass. If the team lets him go, this is him saying like, I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave. I want to put in the work. And as a person who like works that way, I resonate with that, right? Like with that mentality of like, no, I can push harder. No, I could do the work. No, like I said I'm going to do this until then, and that's what I'm going to do until then.
Right.
Let me try to do this until then, unless you've got a really, really valid reason to let me go. And I don't see one quite yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe he'll get it together. Quick shout out. I was checking out where our listeners are coming from, and we have a fair percentage of Australian listeners. So shout out to all my Aussies. Yeah, we'll talk about Danny Rick. Yeah, my kids love Bluey, so it's like they're like dogs. They're Australian. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a kids show. Oh yeah,
everybody, right. Listen, Bluey is.
I didn't know.
Hey, real quick aside, podcast people, if you haven't stepped in and watched an episode of Bluey, you must watch an episode of Bluey. It's life changing. We've got some engagement on the YouTube channel. James is wondering what you're drinking today. I know what I have, but I forgot what you said you had. What are you?
Oh, James, I've got Tito's. Tito's on the rocks. That big handle.
Who would have fucking guessed that he was drinking Tito's today without calling it out? I should have just instantly typed Tito's and not even thought about it.
Shocker.
Thanks,
James.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for the question.
We got to keep ripping because there's some stuff at the end I want to get to. So I'm gonna fly through Alonso. Great Q1 sprint. He ended up like dying out on the grid. Couldn't even fire up. They like had to wheel the car out to the side on the sprint. Needed additional power unit elements and forced him to the back of the grid. Thank you for chugging your Tito's, man. He ended up starting the race at P20 and finishing in the points. He was flying the last 10 laps, ripping it.
Yeah.
He even was so much ripping it and so much confident that as he passed by Tsunoda, he was like, little man, I'm out of here. Like he just...
The Dikembe Mutombo. No.
I got a super good chuckle out of that. I mean, between Alonso and Seb, and we've talked about this before, they're like the paddock dads, you know? I just can't get enough of their antics. It's like if you went racing with your dad on a kart track and you're like, I could really do this. And he was like, nah, you'll figure it out eventually. Like, see you later kind of thing. Super good. It keeps it fresh and fun when all these young guns are being like overly competitive.
Agreed. Yeah. And last thing on there, I know we're going quick, but Tsunoda posted it on his Twitter, the video of it, and he just did like the saluting emoji. So good.
A note to all of the young drivers in the driver academies and the rookies out there: if you want to succeed, pay respect to those who have done and come before you. Yeah. Like, it's just so important. And I feel like that's one of those things that like Yuki, call him crazy, call him wacky, call him what you want. But he understands that, you know, that the training that he's doing with some of the older guys to get into better race form, and that the processes that are set out in front of him are meant for a reason. And he also obviously understands that if Alonso's driving past him doing this, it's got something to it, you know? So I hope at the very least he went up to Alonso after and was like, that was really funny, dude. what should I have done to keep you from flying past me right then? Like, that's what I would have done for sure.
Alonso's like, don't make me put a wheel on the grass, you little jackass. All right, so our worth mentioning, we'll rip through, we're almost done with these drivers, and then we'll go on to, we're going to talk a little track limits. So Ocon, great weekend. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention him. P5 in the race, he had a good quality, good practice sessions, the sprint was solid. Great weekend for him, probably one of his best F1 weekends. I mean, obviously he won in Hungary, but maybe his second best weekend ever in F1. So good on him. I'm not an Ocon fan, but I can respect it. Seb made up 6 places in 7 laps until he made contact with Albon and went off. That was in the sprint. Gasly mugged him off in the race. Seb afterwards is just like, is there a target on my car? I don't know. He might retire after this season with how this is going.
The press release was him essentially saying, like, this was a very unlucky weekend for me through and through. And even the funniest part of all of it is that even after the race, they were like, yo, dog, you had a penalty for track limits. And he was like, oh, cool. Awesome. Thanks. Like,
thanks.
I'm already beat down. Thanks for throwing that at me. Appreciate it.
Oh, man. So, that's what we have there. Did you want to chat about Gasly, or you want to move right on?
Yeah, real quick.
I know Gasly's your guy.
I'll make it expeditious. Before Gasly, then Albon, who, Albon and Gasly previously. I think that with Albon's car, I wanted to see more from him. So it's worth mentioning that he did what he could do, but he didn't actually succeed in showing off the Williams performance the way that the way that I wanted him to, especially after getting knocked out in the rain last weekend. So,
Yeah.
All right. So here's your Gasly thing, right? It's the second race in a row that he ends up in a grid start pinch. It's almost identical to Silverstone, and he's trying to push past on the inside of Hamilton, who's braking. Gasly's popping up and over the car into the corner. Like, could have been a Joe type situation. Like, I don't know. We're almost there. So that lap 1 incident was the 3rd time in the last 4 sprint races. So mental note for you and for the listeners, go ahead and log this one in the notes eventually. We should pour one out for him in the episode before the Brazil sprint, so that way he doesn't dive into a corner in a Brazil sprint and screw himself. But I'm left with this sentiment for you, Brian. Do you think that Pierre maybe had a couple too many fireball shots and went at it a little bit too hard at the sprint start? I mean, he makes some questionable grid start lunges.
He just finds himself in these positions where he ends up being the icing inside the Oreo, and it's like not the place to be, man. And he sticks a nose in there and then tries to come out of it. And I don't know. I mean, the cause could be poor qualifying, right? If he was a couple tenths quicker, he would have made it into Q2, and then he wouldn't have been back there and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know what his deal is at the start of these races. Maybe just a little ambitious.
Yeah, and might be trying to play some catch up for ways that he might have felt insufficient in qualifying in other regards. But all right, speaking of fireball shots, we got a listener question. Richard Perry asked us, if you end up in the paddock with all of the drivers after a long race weekend and you're pouring shots, what's the order that you're going to pour shots for the drivers in? And I won't make you go through all 20. Give me your top 5. Who are you pouring shots for, top 5, and in what order?
Seb, because I just love Seb.
Respect your elders. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the crazy thing. I'm going to go with all the old guys. I love the old guys. So I've got Seb. Alonso just grows on me. He's the world champions. You gotta include, right? In my opinion. So Seb, Alonso, Hamilton. I love Checo, and then Lando doesn't drink, so I can't include him. Even though I love Lando too, I love everybody. And Mick, get Mick in there. So that's my top 5. Seb and Mick will just be hanging out on the side chatting with each other anyway. So
they will. They'll be like, this guy over here is born as shots. Why is he doing this? I don't know.
Who have you got?
I'll rip through it. I would definitely start with Alonso, followed by Serge, because I feel like if you get the two Spaniards fired up, then you've got a real party on your hands. So I'll go.
Sergio's Mexican.
No, sorry, I meant
Sainz.
I meant Sainz. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
You get Alonso and you get Sainz going. Thank you for catching that. They would be very mad at me. And then I think after that, I probably would go with Hamilton, because I'm like, he's just got this mysterious, like, I don't know how you party, but I kind of want to know how you party kind of vibe to him. So
Yeah. He's the GOAT.
Are we partying? I don't know. Here's a shot. Let's see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
And then post that, Yuki, because I want to just get him lit and fired
Yes.
up. Like, I don't know what the fuck's happening with Yuki, but
Saki bombs.
sounds like a good, maybe, I don't know. Sounds like a good plan. Let's do it. And then, oh man, number 5. Number 5 is like a competitive spot. Like,
I know, because you want to list all 20. That's the hardest part.
Ricardo.
Yeah.
And here's why, because Ricardo's going to bring the party home. He's going to be like, shot number 5, let's do it.
He's a party
Yay.
himself, for
This
sure.
guy's going. Yeah. But thanks, Richard, for that question. That was a good one. Got me fired up. We got some more questions from Richard for next week, which, for lack of a better way of putting it, I'll give the audience members a little bit of insight into what's coming for next week's Richard Perry question. It's this one.
And his name is John C.
Figure out what you think you can figure out there, but we'll ask that question next week. We got to save some time here. I know we're running a little bit longer than we wanted to, but it's important to get through this track limit stuff. It's been the contentious discussion of drivers and team principals and teams, and really the FIA and the media in general since the race ended in Austria. Let it rip, Brian.
Yeah, so Pete had an awesome question. Pete in New York, listener question, and I swear I sent it to you. He sent us in this question on July 6th, 2 days before the race started, and I sent it over to Will. So Pete, impressive foreshadowing. You're gonna pick my bets at the end of this episode. So here's his question. He says, "Here's one. What happened to track limits this year? I don't remember many deleted laps during practice or qualifying for track limit violations this season. Seems last year it was constantly happening. Just the tracks F1 had been at so far don't have corners that need monitoring, or is my memory bad? Have we been to a bunch and I forgot them all? For the record, I like the white line being the limit, no curbs or anything else silly, and I like automated detection rather than people monitoring." So, awesome question. Let's break it down, because I could talk about track limits for an hour by itself.
But let's give it the time that it needs, because it is important. Yeah. And I think based on what's happening last weekend and what has happened season so far, this is the beginning of the conversation. It's going to come back. So
for sure. Yeah. Agreed. So we might as well lay it out. So quick explanation of track limits. So if we have new listeners, what is it? I heard it a lot this week for the first time this season. So each track has white lines on the outside. This is the border of the track, the track's limit. So a lot of times there's white line, and then you get some curb, then you might have some gravel or some grass or some wall or whatever it might be. But that white line is on the outside of every single track we'll be at this year. And if all 4 tires go outside that white line, that is a track limit violation. So it can be down to the millimeter, and how they're regulating that is up to them. But that's what track limits is. So are we seeing less this year?
Last year versus this year, or
what do you
FIAs,
think?
and they're not calling out specific corners like they did. So last year, if you go back and watch the pre-race intros, they'll be like, FIA is monitoring track corner, this corner, this corner,
Yep.
this corner, and they're just blanket implementing this white line rule. So drivers are expected to understand and abide by that. And I think that's a fair thing to ask of the drivers. Like, you're a Formula One race car driver. Hey, there's a white line. Don't send the car outside of the white line.
Stay within the lines. Right. Yeah.
Regardless of where you are on the track.
Yep, I agree. And I think this is partly, to Pete's point, partly because we've seen a lot of street tracks, which obviously have barriers instead of curbs and runoff. So we had Saudi, Australia, Miami, Monaco, Baku, Canada. So we went through a stretch where 5 of 7 were not your typical circuits. So I think that plays a huge part into this. And I think, we're all humans, right? It's what's most recent in our memory. What have you done for me lately? So obviously now there's going to be a shit ton of track limits talk, and especially coming up at the French GP as well. Like Castellet, Paul Ricard has tons of runoff, so we're going to see probably some of this stuff next week as well. Yeah. the detection side is very interesting. I don't know how you feel about this, Will, but I love. I could guess how you feel about it. I love the technology. Like, I love the VAR, the tennis. The tennis thing is called Hawkeye line calling system. Okay. And I don't watch a ton of tennis, right? But Wimbledon has been on. And that is just so cool how instantly they get that top-down replay. Oh, man. Yep. That impresses the hell out of me. So I think that would be great. And obviously it's 2022, right? The technology's there. So it would be doable. My guess is the F1 wants that, but they probably don't want to pay for that to be installed or whatever needs to happen at 22 circuits all over the globe. So knowing F1 and how they deal with tracks, circuits, and the people who own them, they're going to say, oh yeah, that sounds great. You go ahead and pay that and install it and do it. And who knows? I would not be surprised if soon that became a requirement to be a grade 1 track and host an F1 race.
That's a very good point, right? Time for the money to put up or kind of shut up, right? Like, hey, you want to have this race here and you want the money and the income from the whole circuit coming here. Great. Then you put the money into the track and have the precedent there for it, whether that be a camera system or perhaps even, a wire-based system where there's a wire running underneath the white line. And if there's a sensor in the tire that if that, boom, penalty, like, let's not even talk about it anymore. But it's going to be a money decision, number one, and it's going to be a decision on the track host to part two to see if that's actually going to be something that they're going to do. Otherwise, Here we are stuck with the manual labor of the FIA stewards making those calls. So on the stewarding side, right, we have this conversation with Seb, and Sebastian Vettel actually walked out of a driver's meeting on Saturday, and he ended up with a 25k euro fine, which is like, he doesn't give a shit because he's Seb. Yeah. But rumors have it, essentially what was said was something to the effect of, like, we always hear the same shit from you guys about how this and that will change and how this and that are precedent for track limit violations and da-da-da-da-da, but nothing ever changes when you say that it will. And since the race last weekend, even Albon, who I would say is relatively quiet when it comes to, like, driver drama, stepped up and was like, hey, we're like chasing moving goalposts as drivers here. In stewarding, you guys have made things a little bit more frustrating for the drivers. And so I was like, well, what does he mean by moving goalpost? And so I went and broke it down. And this is for some of the newer listeners that I think might not have kept up inner season. The goalposts are moving because we're actually rotating the race stewards and the race director this year, race to race. So the stewards who served up a penalty to the last race may not actually be a steward on the next race. And that's typically when drivers would come in and speak up about a disagreement on a penalty or some sort of scenario with the track limit violation that they had in the last race. That kind of sucks. Like, that leaves the drivers upset because there's no consistency from race to race with the certain group of stewards who might see things differently. I might see a corner. In fact, let's use that example earlier about Russell, right? I might see something completely differently than you do. But if I'm not there to speak my case in behalf of the driver when it comes time for the driver to speak his own case, then what good are we doing the drivers with regards to this penalty system?
And it's not only the race director that rotates, the stewards rotate too.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. The whole system moves race to race. And so what I'm taking from this with multiple drivers speaking up about it now is that they just want consistency. Like, if you're going to give me a penalty for this on this race, then give it to me for this exact same incident on the next race, or don't give it to me at either of the races. That's a tough one. Lando brought up a question for you. Actually, Lando phoned me personally.
Did he?
And he said, I've got a question for Brian Dower, co-host of F1 on the Rocks. He goes, do we need the sausages, Brian?
I don't think so, man. There have been some nasty incidents because of those sausage curbs. I think it's Abby Eaton, maybe, went over one, got launched. Gosh, I want to say it was Monza, but maybe it wasn't Monza, and broke her back. We saw at Silverstone in the F2 race hitting the sausage curb and going flying into the halo of Roy Nissany. I think those sausage curbs, I think we're going to see less and less sausage curbs, actually. it makes the theory and the thought makes sense, right? But I think it's too much of a safety concern to start to bring more of those in or make them, bigger or whatever that might be. So I don't think we'll see more of those, but who knows? Maybe we will. What I'd like to see is it solved with technology, like you were saying.
No, that's exactly the point, right? Advocacy for less sausages is advocacy for technology, and in this case, some sort of technology that prevents the need for sausages to exist. Then let's send the car off to the side, scraping into gravel, spinning in circles, as opposed to poor Joe hitting said sausage, or he didn't in this case, but hitting some sort of trap object that sends the car airborne again after it's already been airborne, which no one really needs.
Right. And for somebody who doesn't know what the fuck we're talking about, we're not talking about the sausage that you put in a bun and eat it. So a sausage curb is like a large raised curb that's on the outside of a track to stop you from like cutting a corner or running wide or whatever it might be. I was just thinking of James, who was chatting with us in the YouTube live chat, probably sitting there like, what the fuck are these guys talking about?
Cheers to the sausage that doesn't come in a bun. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that one.
We got to cover all our bases.
Yeah, it was fun. I ran and did some math on track limits for everybody. The violations in Austria for track limits, meaning 4 tires on a vehicle exceeding the white line, were as follows: 16 deleted lap times in quali, 25 deleted lap times in the sprint, 43 deleted lap times in the race.
Wow. All
of which included turns 1, 9, and 10. Except for one turn in turn 7, and I forget who it was. That's a lot of track limit violations.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Who got the penalties? Did you have that?
5-second penalties went to Lando, Gasly, Seb, and Joe. If you remember, there was a spot when Hamilton came on the radio and he was like, "What did I get a warning for?" And I was like, "Dude, chill out. Like, you didn't even get relax. You didn't get a penalty."
And it's funny. His engineer was like, "Everybody else is getting them too. Like, chill out, bro."
Like, I don't like. Have you driven the track perfectly today? I doubt it. So chill out. Yeah. Leclerc, Perez, and Hamilton had the warnings. Didn't actually get to that 4th infraction. 1, 2, 3 infractions get you a warning. The 4th infraction incurs you that 5-second penalty, which obviously people want to avoid. So, fun fact, Brian.
I've got it. Fun fact of the day. We were going to call this podcast. We were going to call it like 12 different things before we landed on this. But fun fact, one of the finalists was outside track limits. So just for our hardcore fans who really want to know those things.
Yeah. We want your feedback, but please don't message us and tell us that we should have named the podcast that, because
we're pot committed at this point.
Yeah, it's too late now. I broke down a segment called "The World is on Fire," and this is just because I had a couple notable mentions from the race weekend. There was more orange smoke in the grandstands than at an Oompa Loompa poker room, and I'm just annoyed for folks who paid a shit ton of money to see a race that they couldn't even see. I think of like other sporting events where like posters aren't even allowed in the front door, like trash it, like you just can't do it. It's going to ruin the experience for other people. And I have an instinct on this one too, that like this won't be the last that we see of this, because I know it's like, oh, it's the Orange Army and it's Max's fans, but it happens elsewhere too. And what if someone gets one of those like shanked into their eyeball and like loses their vision? Like, for me, it's more than a visibility issue, it's a safety issue. So I don't know, I just it made me mad.
Like when you first see it on TV, it's like, that's cool, and then it just like gets over the top. It's like, wow, this looks brutal.
Well,
like,
then you see pictures on social media. Yeah, you see like people
they can't see the track.
There. There's no visibility of any corner from their perspective. It's like
it's brutal. It'll be that way in Zandvoort too, when they go there, which sucks too. But
we had
whatever.
security and abuse reports as well. A lot of discrimination. A lot of people saying some shit that they shouldn't be saying. People who didn't step up to the plate and download the F1 on the Rocks podcast episode where we emphasize the golden rule and how it's important to any sort of competitive activity and everyday daily life. But there were rumors of some extra incoming security at the Hungary GP, so maybe this helps. I don't know. The human condition is the human condition, and all we can do is try and keep people around us accountable. If you hear someone saying some shit, don't say that, dude. Why are you saying that? It's not.
Yeah. It's always going to be there, unfortunately. You know, the only upside for us as Americans is it wasn't at one of our races, because I feel like we get the bad rap all the time, probably rightfully so, but it was almost kind of nice to be like, yeah, fuck yeah, that wasn't us. You assholes.
You say that, but there was at the Miami race, there's a bunch of people in fucking fat ass bathing suits hanging out on a fake beach drinking cocktails and not even watching the race. So you want to talk about Americans reps? That was the American
fair point
way of life there. All right, DraftKings. I'm gonna rip through this. I lost $2 on an Alpine Sprint winning vehicle. I pushed $4 on an Alonso Sprint top 6 finish. This was DraftKings, by the way. This is where I've been making the bets. I lost $2 on a George Russell podium, and I lost $2. I was close, and that's what was frustrating. I was like, I should have just bet on Hamilton. Oh well, too late. Lost $2 on a Checo Perez race win. I was like, he went out of the race. I was like, cool, see you later, $2. Goodbye. I lost $2 on an Alonso podium, which, man, that would have been so cool. Would have been so cool. I don't know.
That would have been nice.
But stay tuned for next week's episode. We're going to do the preview for France, and I'll plan to lose even more money. Maybe I'll just make Brian take the bet, so that way when I can lose, I can send him a Venmo request for the money that was lost.
Yeah, exactly. I get away with it because I'm in a state where we can't bet, so you get to lose all the money, and I just get to laugh about it.
I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Civil liberties at their best. Also, props to Grid Rival. Super cool fantasy sports racing app. Web and mobile. What a really cool product. We've been using it and enjoying it for a couple weeks now. We just finished the second race of the season. We're headed into the third. I had been using it previous to that. Some listeners have actually even mentioned to me that they like it more than the F1 Fantasy League. So currently F1 on the Rocks league leader is Pedal to the Vettel. What a clever name, kind of in a weird cheeky way. I like it. Most folks struggle to ever get past the 1,000 points in one weekend. Pedal to the Vettel on the Austria race did a 1,075 point weekend. Like, killed it.
Yeah,
so
that's
props
a lot.
To that guy. How did you end up doing with yours?
Not well. I think I had like 800. I had Leclerc, so I had the win, but everybody else was bad. I got to get on it. I did them all, I think, in like 3 race contracts, maybe. So they're all off contract at the end of this next week. So I'll do a little more research next time before I dive in.
Yeah, give us your best on that. I'm hoping that I can claw my way up. I was let down by Perez. Had Perez on the team, went out of the race. That DNF really screwed me. Made a poor decision taking Gasly and AlphaTauri. I felt like he was going to do better than he did. He ended up fighting with Alonso the whole time anyway, so it was kind of a loss. And then same here. I'm going to go home and pull my graph paper out and chart some mathematical probabilities on who will score me the most points for next week. So on. Well, for everybody listening still thus far at the 1 hour 8 minute mark, we're thankful for you. We will be back next week with a preview for France and some sort of antics that I previously referred to, a little bit of John Cena action. If you haven't done it, the social follows mean a lot to us. It helps kind of get some additional word out there. Brian's been busting his ass on that Twitter. And find us also on any of the other social media outlets. Get us the follow on Twitch. Get us the follow on YouTube. And if you haven't retweeted or shared F1ontherocks.com website, go ahead and just give it a one-time shout out to your network of people followers. It's going to really help us grow. We don't want to be famous, but we are trying to grow the audience and get some more people that love F1 the way that we do.
Yeah. Shout out to those watching live too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we have
Thank you, James.
We have some real F1
chatter.
on the Rocks live listeners, and we started streaming for that exact purpose. So shout out to James. Thanks, James. That is all for this week. We love you guys.
Thanks for listening to F1 on the Rocks. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe now and watch for updates at f1ontherocks.com. and on social at F1 on the Rocks.